The Great Pyramids of Egypt endure as enduring symbols of humanity's drive and ingenuity. Yet, could the familiar account of their creation be missing key pieces? Suppose the expertise behind these wonders didn't first arise along the Nile. This exploration delves into a rarely highlighted tie between the Giza pyramids and the distant Sumerian society in Mesopotamia, more than 1,000 meters eastward. Far from mere conjecture or myth, this analysis draws on tangible archaeological finds, shared linguistic features, comparable technologies, and intersecting chronologies that point to a profound possibility. The core ideas shaping Egyptian society might have stemmed from an earlier origin in Sumer. The standard history dates Egypt's rise to about 3,100 BC, marked by the merger of its upper and lower realms under the initial pharaoh. Meanwhile, Sumer flourished long before. Urban centers like Uruk and Eridu in Sumer had taken root centuries, or even thousands of years earlier, fostering advances in script, math, star mapping, and building methods that echoed later in Egypt. The order of events matters deeply. Sumer precedes Egypt. This progression alone prompts inquiries into cultural exchanges, the flow of ideas across societies, and whether Egypt's feats were fresh breakthroughs or borrowed legacies. Start with script systems. Egypt's hieroglyphs surfaced around 3,200 BC, blending sound-based signs with image-like depictions to form an intricate method for capturing speech. Sumer's cuneiform, however, appeared centuries prior. The oldest tablets from Uruk trace back to roughly 3,400 BC, documenting bureaucratic dealings, shrine stockpiles, and commerce. Visually distinct from hieroglyphs, cuneiform shares a parallel framework. Each merges auditory markers with semantic ones, evolving from prior image-based roots. In both places, script burst forth amid societies leaping to unprecedented levels of coordination. Such abrupt development in writing across these lands demands attention. Script doesn't arise out of nowhere. It demands purpose and demand. For Sumer, the driver was commerce. Vast temple networks needed tracking for food reserves, animal herds, and bartering. Egypt mirrored this, as the realm's consolidation called for oversight of levies, governance, and unified rule. Still, the polish of initial hieroglyphs hints at deeper roots than basic logging. The signs display elegance, creativity, and uniformity, lacking the rough trial and error typical of a wholly original creation. They emerge nearly complete, implying that the notion of writing, if not its exact forms, arrived as an import rather than a solo invention. Digs reveal interactions between Sumer and Egypt before the dynasties. Mesopotamian cylinder seals turned up in Egyptian burials from the Naqada II era, circa 3,500 to 3,200 BC. Crafted from durable rock with elaborate patterns, these tools stamped claims of possession and verified records. Their discovery in Egypt proves exchange. Whether traded as goods or carried by Sumerian visitors, the fact of connection stands firm. In either case, concepts, skills, and insights could follow those paths. The building resemblances prove just as persuasive. Sumer's ziggurats and Egypt's pyramids embody shared principles. Each forms enormous tiered edifices from rock or clay blocks. Both fulfill sacred roles, bridging the ground to the divine. Both demand advanced planning, labor coordination, and geometric expertise. The ziggurat of Ur, erected circa 2100 BC, outdates many Egyptian pyramids, yet builds on prior Sumerian designs. It ascends through 3 levels, diminishing in size upward for a terraced silhouette. Its heart consists of sun-dried bricks, originally clad in baked ones to resist erosion. Contrast this with Saqqara's step pyramid from about 2650 BC. It climbs in 6 diminishing steps, the essence matches. A tiered form reaching skyward. Details vary. Egypt favors cut stone over clay, and pyramids house the dead, while ziggurats support shrines. Yet the core vision, the grammar of design, aligns. Societies in both realms embraced vertical construction, structures evoking elevation and grand builds to convey faith and dominion. Egypt's shift from stepped to smooth-sided pyramids reflects trial, adjustment, and polish. The bent pyramid at Dashur marks a key intermediate stage, as its builders aimed for a smooth-sided pyramid but altered the slope angle partway through to avoid structural failure. Such efforts highlight a process of trial, error, and gradual mastery. But what exactly were they learning from? If the idea of erecting enormous monuments originated solely within Egypt, why do we lack prior prototypes or botched experiments from earlier eras? The step pyramid emerges abruptly in the 3rd dynasty, yet just 2 dynasties later, the Egyptians construct the Great Pyramid with an accuracy unmatched by later works. The advanced math embedded in the architectures of both Sumer and Egypt points to a shared origin or exchange of ideas. Sumerians relied on a sexagesimal system based on 60, which endures in modern timekeeping and angular measures: 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, 360 degrees in a circle. Far from random, this base offers mathematical grace, being divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30, which simplifies computations, fractions, and celestial reckonings. Egyptians favored a decimal base 10 approach, yet documents like the Rind Papyrus reveal expertise in fractions, geometry, and computations that echo Sumerian techniques. Approaches to figuring circle areas, surveying fields, or allotting provisions demonstrate deep insight, with some techniques predating their Egyptian use in Sumer. The Plimpton 322 tablet from circa 1800 BC features trigonometric tables, while Babylonian math anticipates the Pythagorean theorem long before the Greek philosophers' era. This expertise thrived in Mesopotamia before manifesting in Egypt, frequently in parallel ways. Astronomy offers further ties. Both societies scrutinized the skies with remarkable accuracy. Sumerians crafted a lunar calendar from moon phases, pinpointed the zodiac by splitting the heavens into 12 zones linked to distinct star groups, and charted paths of Venus, Jupiter, and other worlds across years and generations. Far from idle skywatching, this involved methodical monitoring, recording data, and discerning patterns. Egyptians devised a solar calendar tied to Sirius's heliacal rising, the star's pre-dawn reappearance after solar invisibility, which synced with the Nile's yearly inundation. This reliable phenomenon enabled flood preparations, farming schedules, and societal alignment with nature's pulses, yet the practice of monitoring stars for real-world applications stems from Sumerian roots. Egyptians likely tailored it to their environment, but the core methods display striking parallels. The Great Pyramid's orientation to true north, off by a mere 3 arc minutes, demands precise stellar tracking. Locating true north sands tools involves watching circumpolar stars rotate about the north celestial pole and having their paths arc, a process outlined in Sumerian astronomical records. The Mul-Apen tablets from about 1000 BC, but drawing on ancient observations, detail star tracking, timing, and directional fixes. Egyptians employed these very approaches. Did they innovate them alone, or draw from Mesopotamian influences? Linguistic ties between Sumerian and ancient Egyptian remain debated, yet intriguing. Proving direct word loans proves challenging. Sumerian stands as an isolate, unlinked to any family, while Egyptian fits the Afro-Asiatic group. Structurally distinct, the tongues still exhibit odd overlaps in terms, especially those for building, governance, and stars. Egyptian for _0 echoes, Sumerian building words phonetically. Their term for scribe, sesh. Parallels Sumerian Dubser. Such matches might be chance. Distant languages often yield like sounds for akin ideas, but paired with digs showing interactions, they carry weight. Deity names reveal another compelling thread. Sumer's Enki, overseer of waters, intellect, and trades, mirrors Egyptian Ta, patron of makers, builders, and Genesis. Each imparts vital human arts and underpins societal bases. Sumer's Inanna, tied to romance, conflict, and Venus, resembles Egyptian Hathor and, eventually, Isis in traits. Such similarities might stem from shared human archetypes or universal patterns in how people imagine gods, yet they may also point to cultural diffusion, with religious concepts spreading via ancient trade paths. Beliefs about the afterlife reveal striking resemblances in Sumerian and Egyptian traditions. Each society envisioned death as the start of a hazardous voyage. In Sumerian lore, souls venture downward to the underworld, a shadowy domain governed by the goddess Ereshkigal. The path is fraught with danger, as the departed must traverse 7 gates, shedding a piece of clothing or jewelry at everyone to stand bare and vulnerable at the final reckoning. Egyptian tales depict a comparable odyssey where the departed traverse the Duat, the realm below, confronting tests and perils. There, the heart faces judgment against the feather of Mat, embodiment of truth and balance. Should the heart tip the scale with guilt's weight, it consumes it, erasing the soul forever. But if it balances lightly, the spirit advances to the field of reeds, an idyllic realm echoing the living world. In both frameworks, souls encounter evaluation, barriers to overcome, and fates of destruction or eternal bliss. Each demands wisdom, readiness, and righteous living beforehand. The Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Sumerian descent of Inanna echo one another in plot lines, motifs, and symbolic phrasing. They might arise separately, as diverse peoples worldwide confront death and morality. Still, details like the gates, the balancing, and the underworld's layout imply common roots or exchange. Historical records attest to trade links spanning Mesopotamia and Egypt. Routes overland via the Levant bridge these lands. Lebanon supplied cedarwood to both Egypt and Sumer. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan flowed westward into Mesopotamia and southwestward to Egypt. Copper sourced from the Sinai Peninsula traveled eastward to Mesopotamia. Far from mere unilateral trades, these networks formed intricate webs of dealers, middlemen, and cultural swaps. Not just commodities moved along them, travelers, concepts, and expertise did too. Mesopotamian relics unearthed in Egyptian graves underscore this interplay. Cylinder seals, as noted before, mark a hallmark of Mesopotamian craft. Found in Egypt's elite tombs, they show that high-ranking Egyptians prized such items, grasped their import, and fostered ties with Mesopotamian merchants or envoys. These objects served as more than curios. They signaled prestige and bonds with far-off advanced societies. Egypt's abrupt rise to prominence circa 3100 BC warrants close examination. Prior to unity, the land held dispersed farming villages hugging the Nile. Residents tilled soil, raised livestock, and honed simple trades. They dwelled in humble homes of mud, brick, and reeds. Yet in mere generations, grand stone edifices sprang up. Script evolved, unified rule took hold, and Egypt ascended as a pinnacle of ancient glory. This swift leap defies solely homegrown causes. Outside forces, be it commerce, influx of peoples, or incursions, offer a compelling account. Certain scholars argue for a Mesopotamian migration surge into Egypt between 3,400 and 3,100 BC, prompted by drought, scarcity of resources, or unrest back home. This influx could have delivered artisans, builders, writers, and clerics to Egypt. Settling amid fertile Nile lands yet modest social order, these newcomers likely shared advanced methods, fresh perspectives, and governance models. Gradually, such inputs blended with indigenous ways, yielding Egypt's signature heritage. Clues to this movement appear in shifts of ceramic forms. By 3200 BC, Egyptian wares display Mesopotamian traits. Novel contours, patterns, and firing methods emerge abruptly. Such changes evoke hands-on links, copying, or Mesopotamian artisans active in Egypt. Bones from that era exhibit greater variety in skull proportions, pointing to newcomers from afar. Though DNA evidence remains sparse due to degradation, it suggests inputs from Levantine and Mesopotamian lineages in Egypt's pre-dynastic and early dynastic eras. Hierakonpolis, a major pre-dynastic hub, yields key insights. Digs there uncover a shrine with building styles akin to Mesopotamian ones. Notably, walls feature inset panels, a signature Mesopotamian method seen in this site. Artifacts from distant lands, such as maces and ritual items in the Mesopotamian manner, indicate that Hierakonpolis served as a vibrant hub of diverse societies, fostering exchanges of goods, customs, and concepts. The Narmer Palette, among Egypt's most renowned relics, marks the consolidation of Upper and Lower Egypt circa 3100 BC. It portrays King Narmer donning the crowns of both territories, emblematic of his supremacy. However, elements like the structured registers for scenes, the emblematic depiction of vanquished foes, and other stylistic choices reveal inspiration from Mesopotamia. Cylinder seals and stelae from Sumer employ comparable arrangements. While the Narmer Palette's theme is purely Egyptian, its visual vocabulary draws heavily from Mesopotamian traditions. Such blending highlights the fusion of cultures that define this era. Egypt's embrace of bronze, working near 3000 BC, aligns with its prevalence in Mesopotamia. This copper-tin alloy proved tougher and longer-lasting than unalloyed copper, transforming the crafting of tools, arms, and structures. Yet Egypt lacked local tin deposits, necessitating imports probably from Afghan or Anatolian origins via Mesopotamian commerce routes. Expertise in blending metals, molding bronze, and securing tin supplies all underscore Mesopotamian input. The plow, a pivotal advance in farming, emerged simultaneously in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Initial traces of its application date to Mesopotamia circa 4000 BC, spreading to Egypt by 3000 BC. The basic form, a timber frame linked to a pulling animal, featuring a sharp blade to turn the earth, mirrored designs across regions. This implement vastly boosted crop yields, empowering cultivators to farm broader expanses and generate excess provisions. Such abundance sustained growing communities, dedicated crafts, and city formation. Transferring the plow to Egypt, presumably from Mesopotamia, proved revolutionary, spurring the demographic expansion and administrative sophistication of proto-dynastic times. The wheel, a vital breakthrough, debuted in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Early versions consisted of solid wood circles initially for turning pots, then repurposed for carts. Wheeled carts proliferated throughout Mesopotamia by 3000 BC. In Egypt, however, the wheel arrived far later, around 1600 BC in the Second Intermediate Period. This lag raises questions given the interactions between the regions. Egyptian merchants and explorers surely encountered wheeled conveyances. Still, the technology remained unused for more than 1,000 years. Geography offers one rationale. The slim Nile corridor and dependence on watercraft reduced the need for wheels. Cultural reluctance provides another. Once traditions took root, Egypt often shunned select foreign ideas in favor of established practices. Yet this resistance wasn't universal. Some Mesopotamian advances were swiftly incorporated, implying deliberate selection. Egypt absorbed beneficial elements while discarding others. Systems of writing, math, grand building, and bronze work found ready integration. The wheel did not. This discerning approach implies sustained ties between the societies, with Egyptians attuned to Mesopotamian progress and intentionally picking innovations to adopt. Parallels in royal ideology are equally notable. In Sumer, rulers weren't deemed deities, but as divine proxies, caretakers upholding harmony and fairness. The Sumerian king list, assembled circa 2000 BC, yet drawing on prior lore, outlines a lineage of monarchs with heaven-granted reigns. Pre-deluge eras featured rulers with fantastically extended terms, spanning millennia. Post-flood durations grew plausible. This blend of myth and record bolstered monarchical power by tying it to celestial roots. Egyptian rulership elevated this notion. The pharaoh transcended mediation, incarnating Horus in life and merging with Osiris in death, a living god. This god-king model granted unchallenged power, ironclad validation, and a spiritual structure binding the realm. Nonetheless, the core principle of sacred-derived rule traces to Mesopotamia. Egypt intensified and reshaped it, forging one of antiquity's mightiest thrones. Temples' functions in both realms display comparable dynamics. In Sumer, these sanctuaries acted as economic powerhouses, overseeing sprawling lands, directing harvests, and coordinating workers. The Inanna Temple at Uruk, for instance, supported thousands of staff, held wide tracts of arable ground, and engaged in commerce spanning Mesopotamia and farther afield. Far beyond mere ritual sites, they form the backbone of societal operations. It functioned as a business enterprise, a governing body, and a hub of culture all in one. Temples in Egypt operated in much the same way. The vast temple sites at Uruk and Luxor managed immense fortunes, held property across the length of Egypt, and supported large contingents of priests, record keepers, workers, and artisans. These complexes acted as hubs for resource allocation, gathering taxes in the form of goods, and then allocating portions, payments, and supplies. This framework, with the temple at the core of societal organization, emerges first in Say before being echoed in Egypt. The idea of land ownership by the divine is shared between the two. In Sumer, every plot of land was ultimately the god's property, overseen by the temple acting for them. In Egypt, all territory was the pharaoh's domain, the god incarnate, who allotted usage privileges to temples, elites, and ordinary people. Such a god-ruled economy centralized authority, streamlined oversight, and lent sacred legitimacy to taxes and required labor. The parallels point to either parallel invention or, more probably, the spread of the idea from Mesopotamia to Egypt. Another link comes through irrigation methods. Both societies relied on major rivers. Mesopotamia had the Tigris and Euphrates, Egypt the Nile, though the waters flowed quite differently. The Mesopotamian rivers were erratic, given to ruinous floods and abrupt shifts in path. Taming them demanded vast setups of channels, embankments, and runoff systems. cities in Sumer poured huge efforts into water management networks that channeled moisture over the floodplain. The Nile proved far steadier, with its yearly inundation coming on schedule and leaving behind fertile mud to revive the earth. Egyptian water control was more straightforward, mainly involving catchments to trap the overflow and let it seep into the croplands. Far fewer structures were required, yet the underlying approaches to organization, land measurement skills, and calculations for apportioning water reveal echoes of Mesopotamian ways. Scribes in Egypt figured out plot sizes, water amounts, and workforce needs through techniques that echo earlier Sumerian records. The sexagesimal system's impact on Egyptian time measurement is understated yet important. Egyptians split the daylight and dark into 12 segments apiece, a choice without clear heavenly rationale, since 12 ties to no cosmic rhythm. However, 12 equals 1/5 of 60. Breaking the full day into 24 hours, further divided into minutes and seconds, carries the stamp of the sexagesimal approach passed along from Mesopotamia. Egypt's calendar, rooted in the solar cycle, drew in features from moon-based ones too. The official version had 12 months of 30 days, plus 5 extra to reach 365. Still, it slowly slipped out of sync with the real solar year of about 365.25 days. The Egyptians knew of this mismatch, but stuck with the practical version for bureaucracy, turning to sky watches to mark the genuine seasons. This two-tier setup, upholding an easy administrative tool alongside true celestial tracking, resembles what happened in Mesopotamia. Flood legends surface in Sumerian lore and later Egyptian accounts as well. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Mesopotamia's premier tale, features Utnapishtim, survivor of a massive deluge unleashed by the gods against humankind. Alerted by Ea, Utnapishtim crafted a vessel, filled it with beasts and kin, and rode out the catastrophe. Once the surge ebbed, he performed rites, earning eternal life from the deities. This account precedes the Bible's flood tale and matches it in many specifics. The gods' verdict to wipe out mortals, the alert to a virtuous figure, boat building, animal gathering, dispatching birds to check for land, and post-flood offerings. The resemblances are so exact that experts agree the biblical version stems from Mesopotamian roots. Egyptian deluge stories play a smaller role, logical considering the Nile's steady, helpful rises, yet later writings allude to apocalyptic waves, godly retribution, and a spared few. These hints are scattered and could stem from Mesopotamian sway or subsequent Levantine influences. The spread of the flood legend highlights how tales, spiritual concepts, and shared heritage travel across societies, shifting to fit new surroundings while holding on to essential threads. Building methods for Mesopotamian ziggurats and Egyptian pyramids reveal parallels alongside contrasts. Ziggurats rose from mud bricks, plentiful and simple to shape in Mesopotamia. These blocks were air-dried or baked in kilns, stacked in layers, frequently bound with bitumen as adhesive. Their interiors formed a solid mass of brick. The outer surfaces of ziggurats were typically covered with baked bricks, or occasionally colorful glazed tiles, which added vibrancy and protection against the elements. In contrast, Egyptian pyramids relied on stone materials like limestone and granite for their construction. While stone offered greater longevity compared to brick, it proved more challenging to shape and manipulate. The Egyptians extracted stone from quarries with copper implements and grinding agents, fashioned it into massive blocks, and hauled them to building sites via sledges, rollers, or even waterways. The finesse seen in Egyptian masonry far exceeded the craftsmanship of Mesopotamian bricklaying. Yet, at their core, both approaches hinged on mobilizing vast workforces to erect imposing edifices. Mesopotamia's scarcity of suitable stone for grand architecture stemmed not from ignorance, but from the region's natural limitations. Its fertile alluvial plains yielded plenty of clay, reeds, and bitumen, yet scarcely any viable rock for construction. Egypt, on the other hand, boasted plentiful deposits of limestone and granite. Each society simply adapted to its available resources. Nevertheless, both civilizations harbored a grand vision of monumental building to fashion enduring symbols of authority that bridged the mortal realm and the divine, lasting across ages. The tiered forms of ziggurats and initial pyramids represented an effective structural innovation. A sheer, towering form becomes precarious when scaled up enormously. Spreading the load via terraced or inclined profiles ensured greater balance. Beyond engineering, the ziggurat's levels doubled as practical spaces, accommodating minor sanctuaries and routes for ceremonies. For pyramids, the sleek inclines, formed by overlaying smooth casing stones over the steps, evoked the sun's descending beams, linking the pharaoh to Ra, the solar deity. However, the foundational notion of ascending in layers originated in Mesopotamia. Around 3200 BC, the White Temple in Uruk perched atop an elevated platform that set it apart from the urban sprawl below. At Eridu, preceding edifices reveal a progression of shrines stacked successively, with each layer erected atop the debris of its predecessor, incrementally elevating the holy zone. This habit of vertical accumulation, mimicking man-made hills, laid the groundwork for a custom that Egypt would eventually embrace and refine. Their purposes diverged significantly. Ziggurats functioned as bases for temples, with the sacred edifice crowning the peak and reachable by ramps. Clerics climbed these to conduct ceremonies, present tributes, and commune with deities. The ziggurat proper wasn't the sanctified area, but the pedestal elevating the temple toward the skies. Pyramids, however, served as sepulchres. The pharaoh's resting place resided inside or under the monument, safeguarding the remains, treasures, and acting as an everlasting tribute. Still, pyramids carried profound spiritual weight. Their form mirrored the original hillock, the initial earth rising from primordial chaos at the world's birth. Erecting one allowed the ruler to reenact Genesis, upholding universal harmony and securing personal resurrection. Even with such disparities in role, both designs conveyed parallel themes, forging links between ground and sky, intertwining vast architecture with faith, and deploying immense communal efforts to showcase dominion and societal cohesion. These overlapping motifs hint at shared ancestral roots or notable exchanges. Sumeria's sway over Egypt prompts inquiry into creativity and borrowing. Were the Egyptians mere recipients of Mesopotamian wisdom, or did they proactively pursue, modify, and evolve it into a quintessentially their own? Clues favor the second view. Egyptian society didn't merely imitate Mesopotamia. It forged a distinct blend of borrowed concepts and local heritage, molded by terrain, supplies, and societal norms. The Nile's layout profoundly influenced Egypt's development. Flowing northward along a constricted corridor, it formed a streamlined domain, ripe for unified rule from a single hub. Its reliable inundations delivered fertile soil for farming, sparing the intensive canal systems demanded in Mesopotamia. Such environmental edges enabled Egypt to sustain a sizable populace and strong central rule, minus the elaborate administration Mesopotamia required. Yet environment by itself doesn't account for Egypt's feats. The expertise for pyramid erection, script invention, governance, and refined arts had to originate somewhere. Pointers indicate Mesopotamia as a key contributor, vital, though not sole. The part played by go-betweens in spreading this knowledge merits examination. The Levant, bridging Mesopotamia and Egypt, hosted trade hubs, urban centers, and nomadic bands that eased interactions. Places like Byblos in Lebanon acted as hubs where commodities and concepts from afar intermixed. Traders from the Levant journeyed to both lands, picking up tongues, practices, and skills from each. Merchants acting as translators and go-betweens played a key role in disseminating knowledge across regions. The blending of cultures that formed Egyptian society drew from various sources. Traditions from sub-Saharan and other African areas shaped religious rituals, artistic expressions, and community organizations. Peoples from Libya in the western deserts mingled with those along the Nile, introducing their unique practices. Interactions through Mediterranean commerce exposed Egypt to Aegean and Anatolian ways of life. Yet, the impact from Mesopotamia, which arrived in the vital pre-dynastic era, laid the groundwork for administrative systems and technological advances that underpinned Egyptian society. The moment of this interaction matters greatly. Had Mesopotamian ideas reached Egypt only after it had already established script, monumental building, and unified governance, their role would have been minor. Instead, these exchanges happened amid Egypt's early evolution as dispersed settlements coalesced into a cohesive polity. Such early timing magnified their effects profoundly. Concepts absorbed in a culture's foundational stages steer its long-term path in manners that subsequent inputs rarely match. Sumer's enduring impact reached far beyond Egypt. Innovations from Mesopotamia rippled throughout the ancient Near East and beyond. The Levantine alphabet, emerging around 1800 BC, drew inspiration from Egyptian hieroglyphs but organized its forms based on principles from Ugaritic scripts. The Greek world, frequently hailed as the cradle of Western heritage, absorbed mathematical, astronomical, and philosophical insights from Babylonian traditions. The Greeks themselves recognized this obligation. Their intellectuals journeyed to Babylon for education, returned with manuscripts, and wove Mesopotamian wisdom into Greek frameworks. The famed Library of Alexandria, a pinnacle of ancient scholarship, collected volumes from the entire Mediterranean basin and Near East, featuring rendered versions of Mesopotamian texts. Thus, discussions of Greek accomplishments rest on Babylonian bedrock. References to Greek astronomy truly build upon Mesopotamian data compilations. This lineage of knowledge flows from Sumer through Babylon to Greece, then Rome, the Islamic Golden Age, medieval Europe, and into our contemporary era. Within this sequence, Egypt served as both recipient and conduit. It absorbed Mesopotamian lore, reshaped it, and relayed it forward to ensuing societies. Figures such as Herodotus and Pythagoras among the Greeks journeyed to Egypt, studied with its priests, and carried those teachings home. The geometrical knowledge embedded in the pyramids, celestial records, and calculative methods all filtered into Greek thought via Egyptian channels. Still, highlighting Mesopotamia's sway over Egypt in no way lessens Egypt's own triumphs. Egyptians seized external concepts and forged innovations of extraordinary splendor, ones that have stirred awe across thousands of years. The pyramids stand as quintessentially Egyptian creations, erected by Egyptian hands, conceived by Egyptian designers to fulfill local spiritual and governmental needs. Yet they arose amid a wider web of intercultural sharing, reciprocal inspirations, and collective human progress. Linguistic traces, though debated, provide further hints. Some Egyptian terms, especially those for specialized crafts, might stem as loanwords from Semitic tongues of Mesopotamia and the Levant. For instance, the Egyptian term for scribe, sesh, could link to Akkadian shataru, denoting writing. Similarly, nub for gold in Egyptian may connect to Sumerian gushkin. these ties remain speculative, hindered by expansive timelines and gaps in reconstructing ancient sounds. Nevertheless, even provisional links, when paired with findings from digs and building styles, form a compelling overall argument. No isolated artifact confirms Mesopotamian sway over Egypt, but a multitude of aligned indicators weave a tapestry that's hard to ignore. Pushback against this notion partly arises from nationalistic sentiments. As an African powerhouse, Egypt occasionally faces protective stances against claims of outside input, as if such admissions undermine native ingenuity. This view sets up a misleading opposition. Every society emerges from interactions. No tradition evolves in a vacuum. Embracing Mesopotamia's role in Egypt's story doesn't render it any less African or inventive. Rather, it positions Egypt within the grand tapestry of humanity's shared past, linked through commerce, movements of people, and cultural dialogues. Comparable reluctance appears in views of Mesopotamia's own borrowings from predecessors. Sumer arose not in isolation. The Ubaid era that came before it reveals signs of structured settlements, water management, farming advancements, and skilled artisanal work. From whence did the Ubaid folk acquire these skills? Likely from even older societies whose traces elude us or await proper identification. The lineage of this knowledge stretches further into the uncharted depths of prehistory, beyond the limits of our existing evidence, into eras without written accounts and where archaeological traces are few and far between. This leads to a broader inquiry. How ancient is structured human expertise? The standard view holds that true civilization emerged between 3,500 and 3,000 BC, marked by the earliest urban centers in Mesopotamia and Egypt. However, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dating back to 9,600 BC, reveals that people were already engaging in grand-scale building, abstract symbolism, and coordinated efforts millennia before what we once assumed. This site came before farming, before ceramics, before all the elements we considered essential for advanced societies. And yet, it endures. Enormous stone pillars forming circular patterns, etched with depictions of creatures and motifs, erected by an enigmatic people with techniques we can merely speculate about. If our ancestors managed Göbekli Tepe in 9,600 BC, what other feats might they have accomplished? What forms of wisdom persisted across the vast stretch from Göbekli Tepe to Sumer? Was this expertise built up slowly, handed down via spoken stories, honed across countless generations? Or did it emerge, vanish, and resurface amid the ebb and flow of societies? The digs we've done yield only pieces of the puzzle, the tough remnants from groups that likely created far more than just rock formations and clay vessels. The notion of a pre-Sumerian wellspring of ideas, an advanced precursor society that shaped both Sumer and via Sumer Egypt, remains conjectural, yet it's compelling enough to explore. Should Sumer have drawn from some prior foundation, it could account for the abrupt emergence of refined skills in Mesopotamia. It might clarify why some innovations show up polished and complete, skipping visible stages of trial and error. It could even illuminate the echoes in Sumerian legends of pre-flood rulers and wise figures who bestowed insights upon humankind. The Sumerian king list speaks of monarchs reigning prior to the deluge, with reigns of unreal lengths. Post-flood, it declares that kingship came down from the skies, implying the new leaders gain their power and understanding from a heavenly or antecedent origin. The Apkallu, those 7 mythic sages in Sumerian lore, were entities who instructed humans in the crafts of urban life, script, construction, farming, and rule. Such tales, typical of myths everywhere, might twist real events through the ages, but retain a core of fact. Suppose an earlier society did thrive, reaching heights of complexity until a disaster wiped it out. Its refugees would have spread scraps of learning to fresh lands. Those scraps, transmitted orally, would evolve and take root in later groups. Sumer could well have absorbed such inheritance. Egypt, interacting with Sumer, might have picked it up indirectly. This framework accounts for the similarities, the abrupt debuts, and the common roots, all without positing a straight line from one origin point. Still, it's all hypothesis. Clues for a pre-Sumerian society are indirect at best. Folklore, odd finds, edifices that defy the usual chronology, but nothing solid like urban ruins, inscriptions, or state systems predating Sumer. Without that, the idea of a pre-Sumerian culture stays fascinating, but unsubstantiated. What we know for sure is the bond between Sumer and Egypt. Commerce paths tied them together. Objects traveled to and fro. Concepts followed the trade winds. The expertise behind Egypt's pyramids didn't spring up out of nowhere. It drew from priors, origins, and stimuli. Mesopotamia, with its head start in scripting, numeracy, and vast structures, stands as the likeliest contributor. The building progression there backs this up, from basic mounds to elaborate ziggurats, reflecting steady innovation and polishing. The White Temple in Uruk crowns a raised base that developed across ages. Prior shrines there started modest and level with the earth. Layer by layer, over time, builders elevated the mound into a man-made rise. The layers of history make this clear. We can follow the phases, grasp the buildup, comprehend the method. Egypt's grand works, on the other hand, burst onto the scene without warning. The step pyramid at Saqqara, from about 2650 BC, has no forerunners. No modest trials, no slow scaling of ambition or detail. It arrives whole, immense, and intricate. Such an instant leap hints at outside input, the arrival of a concept plus the know-how to bring it to life. The designer linked to the step pyramid is a half-mythic personage, eventually elevated to divine status as a deity of healing and intellect. His fame points to exceptional prowess, skills that distinguished him from his peers. The origins of this expertise remain a puzzle. If Imhotep acquired his skills within Egypt, who mentored him? What about the prior architects whose efforts laid the groundwork? Their apparent lack points to external sources for Imhotep's insights, possibly interactions with builders from Mesopotamia, or ideas carried by texts and wanderers from the eastern regions. Employing stone in Egyptian designs marked a bold advancement. In contrast, Mesopotamians relied on bricks due to limited stone supplies. With plentiful quarries at hand, Egypt crafted edifices of remarkable endurance. The pyramids endure after 4,500 years, surpassing all other relics from antiquity. Brick-based Mesopotamian ziggurats, meanwhile, have mostly crumbled, surviving only as bases and partial lower levels. Material selection ensured Egypt's enduring heritage, yet the vision of grand-scale construction stemmed from Mesopotamia. Pyramid interiors reveal trial-and-error innovation. The bent pyramid's abrupt angle shift during building highlights obstacles overcome through adaptation. The Pyramid of Meidum, which suffered a partial collapse, underscores that successes weren't guaranteed. Such setbacks and tweaks reveal a process of experimentation, iterative improvement, and evolving methods. However, the core idea, erecting vast forms with exact orientations and deep symbolism, didn't emerge in Egypt. It arrived from abroad, was reshaped, and honed to perfection. Building pyramids demanded mathematical prowess in geometry, trigonometry, and hands-on engineering. estimating incline angles, gauging required stone volumes, coordinating workers, and mapping terrain, all called for strong numeracy and methodical planning. Such competencies don't arise out of nowhere. They build via training, repetition, and shared traditions. Clay tablets from Nippur illustrate how Sumerian scribes formally tackled math, working through puzzles, mastering procedures, and using rules for everyday challenges. Egyptian records such as the Rhind Papyrus echo this focus. They cover area computations, ration distributions, and volume assessments, emphasizing practical uses. Yet the basics, fraction handling, shape equations, structured problem solving, trace back sooner to Mesopotamian writings. Egyptians adopted this math, tailored it to their builds, and documented it locally, but the roots lay in Mesopotamia. Scribes probably facilitated this exchange. As trained upper-class specialists in scripting, math, and governance, they journeyed as envoys, merchants, or consultants. A Mesopotamian scribe reaching Egypt would deliver more than writing skills, numerical savvy, management strategies, and societal norms. As exchanges multiplied through travel and trade, Egypt's intellectual reserves grew, blending imported Mesopotamian elements with unique local twists. Temples as hubs of education bolstered this view. Mesopotamian sanctuaries ran scribal academies teaching standardized math alongside sacred writings. Egyptian holy sites fulfilled parallel roles. Their priests, scholarly and versed in literacy, safeguarded lore. These centers archived documents, educated copyists, and held communal histories. When a Mesopotamian scholar entered an Egyptian temple to exchange scrolls or instruct on techniques, such wisdom integrated into native practices. Egypt's so-called mystery schools, dedicated to passing down esoteric lore, might echo this dynamic. Greek and Roman accounts later portrayed Egyptian clergy as stewards of timeless secrets, handed down from distant eras. Portions of that legacy could trace to Mesopotamian origins, carried over in pre-dynastic times, upheld across generations, and later conveyed to visiting Greek thinkers. Pyramid astronomy, too, bears Mesopotamian marks, precise cardinal alignments, celestial path monitoring, and ritual timing via stars. These predate Egyptian versions. The Mulapin tablets outline star patterns, chart planet paths, and guide calendar calculations. Dating back centuries, this compiled data reflects the diligent efforts of Sumerian and Babylonian stargazers. Though Egyptian sky watching suited its environment, it mirrored those foundational approaches. Tracking Sirius's heliacal rising to herald the Nile flood demanded meticulous noting and logging, much like the observational rigor of Mesopotamian experts. The fundamental idea that heavenly occurrences could be forecasted and applied practically originated in Mesopotamia. Ancient stargazers recognized the precession of the equinoxes, the gradual tilt of Earth's axis over a full cycle of 25,920 years. For generations, the Babylonians documented their sky-watching efforts, observing the subtle drift in stellar locations. Given their extensive timeline and stability, the Egyptians likely detected this movement too. Certain scholars propose that the pyramids incorporate insights into precession, with their orientations indicating recognition of this extended pattern. Should this hold, such understanding might stem from separate breakthroughs or from Mesopotamian origins that had already pinpointed the effect. Beyond the flood tales, mythologies linking Sumer and Egypt reveal deeper ties. Both feature deities who perish and rise again. In Sumerian lore, Dumuzi, the god of shepherds, meets his end and ventures into the underworld, grieved by his partner Inanna. Tied to the seasons and farming rhythms, his demise and revival embody rebirth. Egyptian tales mirror this with Osiris, ruler of the netherworld and fertility, slain by his sibling Set, then chopped apart and dispersed. His wife Isis reassembles the fragments, revives him, and bears Horus. Osiris then oversees the realm of the dead, his comeback signifying immortality. The resemblances stand out. A fertility-linked deity faces death, and underworld travel, is lamented by a goddess companion, and achieves renewal or change. While these motifs appear worldwide, the precise elements and storyline imply borrowing or a mutual source over mere coincidence. Shared motifs of watery origins permeate both cosmologies. Sumerian origin stories open with primeval seas, the fresh water of Apsu, mingling with the briny depths of Tiamat, spawning divinities and shaping the cosmos. Egyptian accounts describe Nun, a shadowy, turbulent abyss whence the initial mound, the Benben, arises. There, the god Atum perches and initiates formation. Each begins amid fluid disorder and emptiness, progressing to solid ground, structure, and vitality. These origin views probably echo the lived realities of these floodplain societies. Reliant on inundating rivers, Mesopotamia and Egypt thrived on the flood's renewal of earth for crops. Such aquatic creation legends transform that dependence into divine lore, yet their closeness hints at interaction. When distant societies echo exact mythic traits, it could mean parallel responses to alike surroundings, or the exchange, modification, and fusion of narratives into a shared mythic heritage. Tracing spiritual influences proves tougher than material ones. Scripts endure on clay, buildings persist as relics, but concepts linger in tales alone. Still, those tales serve as proof. The Epic of Gilgamesh journeyed far across antiquity, with copies unearthed in Hittite records from Anatolia, sites in the Levant, and even Egyptian settings. Its appeal, touching on death, bonds, and life's purpose, propelled its dissemination, towing along Mesopotamian views on eternity, godly verdicts, and mortal fates. Egyptian writings evince exposure to outside lore. The Middle Kingdom's Tale of Sinuhe recounts an official's exile from Egypt to the Levant, his life there, and homecoming. This narrative underscores Egyptian knowledge of distant realms, habits, and folks, revealing travels, cross-cultural meetings, and woven-in adventures. Awareness of the Levant implied familiarity with Mesopotamia. Exposure to its tales, deities, and notions would naturally lead to their absorption, alteration, and embedding in Egyptian ways. Cultural mingling unfolds slowly, subtly, elusively, yet the gathered clues, structural echoes, numeric kinships, mythic bonds, traded items, verbal traces, all signal ongoing ties between Mesopotamia and Egypt in their early eras. The debate shifts from Contact's existence to its depth. To what extent did Mesopotamian sway guide Egypt's path, or was it just one thread in a broader weave? Reality probably rests in the middle. Egypt actively reshaped incoming concepts, not merely accepting them. Egyptians proactively pursued new insights, modified what they absorbed, and forged a unique society. Yet that society rested on bases that incorporated inputs from Mesopotamia. Sumer's enduring impact reached well beyond Egypt's borders. The notion of the city, that vast populations could coexist in compact communities centered on temples, markets, and governance, first emerged in Sumer. Uruk, at its height, circa 3000 BC, may have held up to 50,000 residents, a groundbreaking density. This blueprint for urban living disseminated throughout Mesopotamia, reaching the Levant, Anatolia, and ultimately the broader ancient realm. The invention of writing in Sumer carried worldwide repercussions. It enabled the documentation of deals, the formalization of regulations, the safeguarding of literary works, and the handover of wisdom through time. Absent writing, intricate societies simply couldn't operate. Governance, commerce, and cultural persistence all hinge on capturing data reliably. Sumerian cuneiform sparked various scripts such as Egyptian hieroglyphs, paving the way for the alphabets that dominate global use today. Mesopotamian legal frameworks, including Hammurabi's Code, laid out tenets of fairness, ownership privileges, and societal structure that echoed in subsequent juridical customs. The practice of inscribing laws and posting them openly guaranteed that rulings weren't capricious, but grounded in fixed standards. This principle permeated the ancient landscape, informing Greek, Roman, and ultimately contemporary jurisprudence. The celestial records amassed by Mesopotamian scholars underpinned future astronomical pursuits. The Babylonian zodiac, the partitioning of the ecliptic into 12 constellations, persists in astrology and shaped Western stargazing, monitoring planetary paths, forecasting eclipses, crafting mathematical frameworks for anticipating sky phenomena. All this originated in Mesopotamia and evolved through ages. Farming methods pioneered there, like irrigation, crop alternation, and animal husbandry, proliferated across antiquity. The grains themselves, wheat and barley from the Fertile Crescent, turned into dietary cornerstones for societies spanning Egypt, Europe, and India. Innovations such as the plow, the wheel, and bronze working fundamentally reshaped human existence. Egypt's function in this dynamic was to absorb, refine, and relay. It drew from Mesopotamia, cultivated its singular heritage, and relayed it to ensuing cultures. Greek thinkers drew lessons from Egypt. Roman leaders revered its edifices. Islamic intellectuals conserved its lore. This lineage persists into our era. Today's captivation with ancient Egypt frequently ignores these ties. We regard the pyramids as standalone wonders, feats that defy comparison, but they aren't solitary. They fit into a web of intercultural sharing that bridges lands and epochs. Grasping the pyramids demands grasping Sumer, the commerce paths linking them, the copyists, traders, and wanderers who ferried concepts over sands and waterways. The absent connection between the pyramids and Sumer isn't concealed in a vanished relic or concealed vault. It shines in the digs, the exchanged wares, the building motifs, the numeric writings, the legends and tales common to both realms. That connection embodies interaction, sharing, and reciprocal shaping. It embodies humanity's innate drive to absorb from peers, tweak external concepts, and erect upon predecessors' successes. Far from lessening the pyramid's grandeur, this elevates it. Egyptians borrowed notions from a stone-scarce Mesopotamia and erected enduring wonders surpassing all else. They seized the essence of script and evolved hieroglyphs among history's most elegant notations. They harness stellar insights to orient their builds with accuracy matching today's feats. They blended, pioneered, and sustained a realm lasting 3,000 years. Still, we have to credit the origins. We must accept that no society exists in solitude. Egypt drew from Sumer, Greece from Egypt, Rome from Greece, and the Islamic Golden Age from the collective. We today reap the rewards of this layered wisdom, this relay stretching to Mesopotamia's inaugural urban centers. The pyramids symbolize human triumph, indeed, but also human bonds. They underscore that majestic societies arise not in seclusion, but via interchange, via the flow of individuals and thoughts, via embracing others' lessons while upholding one's essence. This is the absent connection. Not a tangible item, but a continuum. That timeless cycle of human learning, adaptation, and progression, from what came before defines us. Thus, gazing upon the pyramids demands we recognize not merely Egypt, but Sumer, lurking in the shadows. Envision the trade pathways, the record keepers, the traders, the wanderers. Picture an interconnected web of societies where each one adds to the collective, erecting upon mutual bedrock. Such is the authentic narrative of the pyramids, a bond to grasp, not an enigma to unravel. By grasping this bond, we gain insight into our very essence, our position within the vast lineage of human progress. We persist in learning, evolving, and erecting atop the triumphs of our forebears. Far from lessening the pyramid's grandeur, this elevates it. The Egyptians borrowed concepts from Mesopotamia, a land scarce in stone, and fashioned enduring wonders that outlast all rivals. They seized the notion of script and refined it into hieroglyphs, among the most elegant writing systems ever devised. They harnessed celestial insights to orient their edifices with accuracy matching today's feats. Through blending, inventing, and forging ahead, they established a legacy spanning 3,000 years. Yet we owe it to history to credit the origins. No society exists in solitude. Egypt drew from Sumer, Greece absorbed from Egypt, Rome built on Greece. The Islamic Golden Age drew wisdom from every predecessor. We today inherit this vast reservoir of insight. This unbroken thread of sharing traces to Mesopotamia's earliest urban centers. The pyramids endure as testaments to human ingenuity, indeed, but equally to human interdependence. They underscore that mighty societies rise not in seclusion, but via interchange, via the flow of individuals and concepts, via the openness to absorb from afar, while safeguarding one's core. This represents the overlooked thread, not some tangible relic, but an ongoing dynamic, the timeless human cycle of learning, adaptation, and progression from what came before. Thus, gazing upon the pyramids demands we recognize not merely Egypt, but Sumer, lurking in the shadows. Envision the trade pathways, the record keepers, the traders, the wanderers. Picture an interconnected web of societies where each one adds to the collective, erecting upon mutual bedrock. Such is the authentic narrative of the pyramids, a bond to grasp, not an enigma to unravel. By grasping this bond, we gain insight into our very essence, our position within the vast lineage of human progress. We persist in learning, evolving, and erecting atop the triumphs of our forebears. Concrete proof of these interactions grows even more persuasive upon closer inspection of particular relics. In the burial chamber of Den, a First Dynasty ruler reigning circa 2975 BC, excavators unearthed a shard of a Mesopotamian seal. Far from a local knockoff crafted in Egypt, this was a genuine Mesopotamian cylinder seal, etched from lapis lazuli and illustrating motifs in the signature Mesopotamian manner. The seal had journeyed more than 1,000 miles from its origin to rest in an Egyptian king's grave. One such item narrates tales of commercial links, envoy interactions, and intercultural ties across the ancient Near East. Den's burial, however, stands as no outlier. Across early dynastic Egypt, Mesopotamian seals crop up with notable regularity. At Narda, at Abydos, at locations throughout Upper Egypt, these imported items surface in elite interments. Their prevalence in elite settings carries weight. These were not everyday wares trickling to the masses. Rather, they served as luxury tokens, prized possessions signaling ties to remote, advanced realms. Egyptian nobility prized Mesopotamian wares, pursued them actively, and showcased them as emblems of worldly prestige. The flow worked both ways, albeit less often. Ivory from African elephants, shaped in Egyptian motifs, has surfaced in other Sumerian settlements. Egyptian containers hewn from tough rocks such as diorite and phiri show up in Mesopotamian sanctuary hoards. These finds confirm two-way engagement. Egypt and Mesopotamia form no detached realms that merely chance to overlap. Instead, enduring commerce, official delegations, and cultural diffusion bound them for generations. Traces of these pathways can be partially charted. The terrestrial path via the Levant linked the Mediterranean shores to the Euphrates basin. Settlements like Byblo in Lebanon and Ugarit in Syria functioned as hubs, sites where Egyptian and Mesopotamian dealers converged, bartered commodities, and swapped knowledge. These hubs evolved into melting pots, integrating elements from various sources to spawn fused traditions merging Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and indigenous Levantine flavors. Maritime paths proved tougher to follow, yet no less vital. Egyptian vessels assembled from bound cedar boards proved seaworthy for Mediterranean crossings. Records from the time of Sahur, a pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, detail seafaring missions to the Levantine shorelines aimed at securing cedar and other prized resources. These voyages exposed Egyptian mariners to merchants from the Levant and Mesopotamia at bustling harbor towns. Along with commodities, concepts also flowed freely. Crews sailing back to Egypt shared tales, skills, and insights gained from distant lands. On the Mesopotamian front, this interaction featured advanced seafaring capabilities. The Sumerians ventured across the Persian Gulf, exchanging goods with the Indus Valley Society to the east and the Arabian Peninsula to the south. Sumerian writings reference Dilmun, now linked to contemporary Bahrain, as a key commercial center where items from various areas gathered. Traders from Dilmun likely journeyed westward, transporting Mesopotamian products and notions to Egypt via mixed maritime and land paths. The drivers behind this commerce were straightforward. Egypt yielded plentiful gold from Nubia and its eastern deserts. Mesopotamia, by contrast, lacked gold entirely. In Mesopotamian markets, Egyptian gold fetched high prices, adorning temples, crafting royal ornaments, and serving as tokens in diplomacy. Mesopotamia in turn supplied fabrics, refined metals, and opulent items prized in Egypt. Lapis lazuli, sourced from Afghanistan, arrived in Egypt courtesy of Mesopotamian middlemen. Egyptians revered this azure gem as divine, tying it to the skies, and valued it above even gold. Yet trade extended beyond mere finances. Encounters among traders fostered swaps of tongues, traditions, and thoughts. A Mesopotamian trader lingering in Egypt for seasons would pick up the local language, witness native customs, and transport those understandings homeward. An Egyptian trader venturing to Mesopotamia might come back enriched with accounts of towering ziggurats, cuneiform inscriptions, and Sumerian rituals. As such exchanges persisted across generations, the cultural gap between these societies narrowed steadily. Scribes played an indispensable part in this cross-pollination. As the literate upper class, only they could interpret and inscribe texts. In Mesopotamia, these scholars trained in sanctuary academies, mastering cuneiform through replicating classic documents, honing math, and delving into literature. Far from mere notaries, they safeguarded wisdom, upheld societal heritage, and counseled rulers and clergy. A Mesopotamian scribe joining a trade caravan or embassy to Egypt carried his expertise along. Should he take up residence there, wed an Egyptian, and stay, his offspring would grow up versed in both heritages. Such fused figures, fluent in two tongues and steeped in dual ways of life, proved essential as interpreters, consultants, and bridges between cultures. Though indirect, The signs of these people are persuasive. Some Egyptian bureaucratic phrases trace back to Semitic sources. The Egyptian term for record or missive, WD, possibly stems from Semitic etymologies. Egypt's temple governance, with its layered ranks and dedicated functions, echoes Mesopotamian sacred institutions. These similarities imply that Egyptians drew on Mesopotamian methods for administration, tailored them, and wove them into their frameworks. Mesopotamian traces appear in the evolution of Egyptian officialdom. The Old Kingdom's Egyptian realm was strikingly unified, headed by the pharaoh, with viziers overseeing operations and a tiered bureaucracy reaching to regional overseers. This setup enabled grand building endeavors, revenue gathering, and stability over expansive domains. No such frameworks arise from nothing. They demand precedents, examples, and adaptation. Long prior to Egypt's consolidation, Mesopotamian urban centers had forged intricate administrative webs. From temple repositories hold countless tablets logging food allotments, workforce duties, and artisan outputs. Their approach was refined, relying on uniform measures, fixed reporting cycles, and ranked command. Egyptian literati, exposed to this via commerce or envoys, would see its practicality and reshape it for their context. The notion of a realm as a system for gathering and allocating resources based on requirements and rank originates in Mesopotamia. There, temples handled this role. Producers brought crops to sacred stores, vast silos that doled out portions to laborers, clerics, and artisans. It guaranteed sustenance, enabled division of labor, and centralized wealth in organized entities. Egypt embraced this blueprint, but centered it on the pharaoh instead of temples. Formally, all territory was the pharaoh's, who allocated usage to shrines, elites, and the masses. Taxes took the form of goods, which were gathered and kept in government storehouses before being allocated as compensation to bureaucrats, laborers, and soldiers. Such a mechanism supported the massive pyramid constructions, demanding the nourishment of vast workforces over many years. Absent this kind of economic redistribution, those endeavors simply couldn't have happened. The religious underpinnings of Egyptian monarchy likewise bore traces of Mesopotamian ideas, albeit reshaped by unique Egyptian ideas. In Mesopotamia, rulers weren't deities themselves, but agents of the divine, selected to uphold harmony and foster abundance. A king's validity stemmed from godly election, proven via battlefield victories, fair governance, and faithful worship. Sumerian kingly texts portray rulers as picked by particular gods to guide the populace. Egypt reimagined this notion entirely. Rather than just selected by the divine, the pharaoh embodied godhood as the living Horus and offspring of Ra. This god-king status granted unchallenged dominion, quashing any threats to the throne. Yet the core notion that rule originates in the heavenly sphere and acts as a bridge between deities and mortals echoes Mesopotamia. Egyptian pharaohs' enthronement rites included features possibly drawn from Mesopotamian customs. The ruler donned various crowns, each denoting facets of sovereign might. The white one stood for Upper Egypt, the red for Lower Egypt, and the double for the whole realm. Far from simple emblems, these were holy artifacts charged with godly essence, donned in set rituals. The intricate nature of Egyptian accession ceremonies, with their ordered steps and emblematic deeds, hints at inspiration from Mesopotamia's ornate royal consecrations. Egypt's Mayat, the tenet of universal harmony, truth, and equity, mirrors ideas from Mesopotamia. There, Mi denoted the sacred laws shaping society. This encompassed monarchy, clergy, arts like music, and even intimacy. The gods bestowed these Mi, which Inanna once pilfered and carried to her home in Uruk. They embodied the essential framework of existence, the guidelines enabling civilized life. In Egyptian worldview, Mayat played a comparable role. The pharaoh's chief duty was upholding Mayat to safeguard the world's balance. That meant conducting rites, dispensing fairness, shielding the land from disorder, and erecting grand structures. Egyptian cosmology saw the cosmos leaning toward disarray, figured as the snake Apus, who nightly sought to swallow the sun. Steady watchfulness, sacred rites, and sound leadership alone preserved stability. The likeness between me and Mayat points to common roots. Each signifies godly structure taming turmoil. Each demands ongoing human effort to uphold. Each ties sacred duties to ruling power. This idea spread from Mesopotamia to Egypt, likely came via clerical exchanges, common myths, or tailoring Mesopotamian state religion to local Egyptian realities. Egypt's realm of the dead and its layout reveal clear resemblances to Mesopotamian views. Mesopotamian lore described the underworld as Kur, a gloomy domain under the ground where shades lingered in dim obscurity. Reaching Kur meant traversing 7 portals, each overseen by a warden exacting payment. The departed stood bare before Ereshkigal, the underworld sovereign, for her verdict. Egypt's Duat, the domain for the deceased, echoed these traits. The soul navigated 12 zones, mirroring the night's hours, confronting fiends, snakes, and ordeals. In the Hall of Two Truths, the heart balanced against Mayat's feather. 42 assessors reviewed the soul's deeds, hearing the negative confession, a list of wrongs never done. The structural overlaps focus on reckoning, hazardous path, all indicate intertwined mythic heritages, viewing the afterlife as a site of adjudication where the departed answer for mortal conduct wasn't common everywhere. Plenty of old societies saw the beyond as uniform, with everyone ending up alike, morals aside. Yet both Mesopotamia and Egypt crafted moral afterworlds, where righteousness persisted past the grave. This joint stress on ethical reckoning implies either independent evolution or the flow of religious ideas. While Egypt's embalming practice lacked a straight Mesopotamian match, its aim, safeguarding the corpse for eternity, linked to wider Near Eastern worries over mortality and endless life. In Mesopotamian customs, the focus of burials centered on supplying the deceased with provisions like food, beverages, and possessions to aid their voyage to the realm below. Egyptians extended this idea through mummification, which safeguarded the actual corpse to shelter the Ka and Ba, the enduring spiritual essences that persist beyond death. Yet achieving mummification demanded advanced expertise, including anatomical insights, the application of natron and resins, and methods for excising organs while maintaining tissues, all skills that required gradual refinement and careful passing down through generations. Certain scholars argue that initial Egyptian embalming methods bore traces of Levantine or Mesopotamian approaches to body preservation, especially for transporting remains over great distances to final resting places. The scorching Near Eastern environment necessitated such measures to halt decay on extended travels. Over time, these utilitarian methods could have transformed into the sacred ritual of mummification. While canopic jars for holding extracted organs stand as a uniquely Egyptian creation, the notion of handling bodily parts distinctly, acknowledging their varied roles, echoes earlier medical insights from Mesopotamian sources. Cuneiform Sumerian documents outline therapies for illnesses, pinpoint specific organs, and offer formulas for drugs. Comparable Egyptian writings, such as the Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus, feature parallel material, including shared cures and methods of diagnosis. Records show that medical wisdom flowed between Mesopotamia and Egypt, particularly evident in later eras. In the Hellenistic age, healers journeyed widely, and treatises were rendered into different tongues to spread practices. However, such interactions probably started far sooner, amid the early stages when ties between these societies were forming. Both cultures employed particular minerals and botanicals in healing, hinting at common pharmacological heritage. Resins like myrrh and frankincense, valued in ceremonies and remedies alike, circulated as trade items via established trade paths alongside everyday wares. Insights into their attributes, applications, and processing methods undoubtedly accompanied the substances on their journeys. Astronomy in both regions featured dedicated observation sites with parallel purposes, though each evolved its own traits. Mesopotamians performed celestial watches from ziggurats, where lofty terraces offered unobstructed sights of the skyline. The priestly experts who managed these tasks were elite figures from scholarly lineages, handing down expertise from parent to child. They inscribed findings on durable clay tablets, amassing records that covered hundreds of years. The renowned Mesopotamian compendium, Mul Apin, assembled circa 1000 BC, yet drawing on ancient data, lists constellations, charts celestial paths, and details ways to compute the yearly cycle. It embodies the peak of long-term scrutiny, an accumulated legacy shaped by successive waves of skywatchers. Though Egyptian star lore survives in fewer records, it reveals comparable depth. The stellar vault in Senenmut's tomb, an advisor to Hatshepsut, reigning about 1470 BC, portrays star patterns, wandering stars, and the ever-visible northern ones with striking detail, underscoring precise watching skills. The decans, comprising 36 stellar clusters that divided the darkness into segments, enabled Egyptians to gauge nighttime passage with impressive fidelity. Still, the decans' beginnings remain debated. Some attribute them to pure Egyptian ingenuity, while others see Mesopotamian inspirations reshaped for local use, splitting the evening into segments, following star ascents, and applying the stars for timing, all trace back sooner to Mesopotamia. Egypt's distinct approach with decans, bypassing zodiac markers, highlights creative adjustment. Yet the core idea bears Mesopotamian origins. Even the basics of timing owe a debt to Mesopotamian ways. The split of each day into 24 hours, further broken into 60 minutes apiece, and those into 60 seconds, stems straight from Sumerian sexagesimal reckoning. Its neat math, easy fractions, and alignment with heavenly patterns established it as the norm throughout antiquity. Egypt embraced this framework, even as its writings mentioned other schemes tied to sunlight duration and yearly shifts. Egyptian nighttime gauges, known as water clocks, resemble Mesopotamian clepsydras in design. Each operates by letting water flow steadily from a container, with etched lines showing time passed. The setup stays basic, needing just a pot with a tiny outlet and measured scales. Achieving precise markings on these clocks to adjust for changes in nighttime duration across seasons reveals a deep grasp of math and celestial observations. Egyptian versions frequently featured engravings of starry motifs and sacred writings, elevating everyday tools into ceremonial items. This blend of utility and spiritual meaning, so typical of Egyptian creations, sets them apart from similar items in Mesopotamia. Yet the core mechanism of the water clock emerged first in Mesopotamian records. Another instance of knowledge transfer involves the rise of glassworking. The first glass items, like beads and tiny containers, surfaced in Mesopotamia circa 2500 BC. These initial pieces were murky, tinted by natural contaminants and intentional mixes. Crafting glass demanded expertise in intense heat processes, mineral behaviors, and the reactions triggered by firing. In contrast, Egyptian glass emerged around 1500 BC in the New Kingdom era, but it debuted at an advanced level, yielding see-through hues and intricate shapes. This abrupt leap in sophistication points to diffusion from elsewhere, not separate development. Egyptian artisans likely picked up the skills from Mesopotamian or Syrian experts, either via hands-on teaching or by examining traded goods and replicating the methods. Records in the Amarna letters, a set of 14th century BC diplomatic dispatches, confirm the commerce in raw and crafted glass. Penned in Akkadian cuneiform on clay tablets, these documents detail interactions between the Egyptian pharaoh and leaders of nearby realms. Glass features in the listed gifts, underscoring its prestige and the pathways of its spread. The letters themselves highlight the broad interactions between Egypt and Mesopotamia in the Late Bronze Age, employing Akkadian, a Semitic tongue rooted in Mesopotamia, as the go-to language for diplomacy, illustrates Mesopotamian sway over global affairs. Egyptian writers mastered Akkadian for negotiations, delved into Mesopotamian texts, and wove Mesopotamian protocols into their own diplomatic routines. Alliances through marriages between Egyptian rulers and Mesopotamian royals forged personal ties. These incoming brides from abroad came with entourages of attendants, clergy, and artisans, carrying their customs, faiths, and skills. Gradually, their impact seeped into the Egyptian royal sphere, sparking fresh styles in clothing, cuisine, and concepts. The merging of religions, where outside gods joined Egyptian rites, embodies this interplay. The goddess Astarte, with Levantine origins tracing back to Mesopotamian Ishtar/Inanna, entered the Egyptian divine lineup in the New Kingdom. Revered for warfare and sensuality, Astarte kept her Mesopotamian traits even as she wove into local lore. Her rites included unique foreign customs, such as particular sacrifices and rites that strayed from age-old Egyptian ways. Embracing these outsiders went beyond polite acceptance or token nods. It stemmed from true faith in their might, their right to devotion, and their power to aid followers. Egyptian troops, likely exposed to Astarte's veneration among Levantine partners or underlings, carried her worship home. Shrines rose in her name, clergy formed, and feasts marked her calendar. This cycle of borrowing and reshaping faiths persisted across Egypt's timeline. The deity Bez, a squat figure linked to birthing, safeguarding, and home matters, could have roots beyond Egypt, perhaps in Nubia or the Levant. His visuals, traits, and place in folk beliefs set him apart from core Egyptian figures. Still, Bes gained massive favor, his likeness gracing charms, furnishings, and daily wares across the land. The readiness to welcome and fold in foreign divinities into the established pantheon signals Egypt's receptivity to outside input. Such flexibility reached into various spheres, from tech and crafts to design, building, and scholarship. Egypt never sealed itself off, shunning all imports to cling to homegrown ways. Instead, it thrived as a hub of cultures, eagerly taking in beneficial elements and molding them to suit its own context. Egyptian art evolved with waves of external touches, especially in eras of flux marked by unrest or incursions that upended old norms. During the Second Intermediate Period, when the Hyksos, a Semitic group likely originating from the Levant or Mesopotamia, dominated northern Egypt, fresh artistic elements emerged alongside innovations such as the horse-drawn chariot and advanced combat strategies. Egyptian records long portrayed the Hyksos as despised outsiders who corrupted the sacred territory. Yet, Contemporary excavations paint a nuanced reality. The Hyksos embraced Egyptian royal designations, constructed using local architectural methods, and honored both native deities and their ancestral ones. Far from mere aggressors, they formed a governing class that fused imported customs with indigenous ones. At their stronghold of Avaris in the Nile Delta, evidence reveals a fusion of Egyptian and Levantine building designs, ceramic varieties, and funerary customs. The advancements in weaponry and transport that the Hyksos brought revolutionized Egypt's armed forces. The composite bow, crafted from layered wood, horn, and sinew, offered superior distance and force compared to conventional Egyptian versions. Lightweight chariots featuring spoked wheels granted remarkable speed across combat zones. Enhanced bronze gear and blades, produced through superior metalworking, provided warriors with superior defense and deadlier tools. These developments weren't inventions of the Hyksos themselves, but stemmed from wider Near Eastern progress, originating in Mesopotamia, honed in Anatolia and the Levant, and delivered to Egypt via the Hyksos. Once indigenous pharaohs ousted the Hyksos and restored unity, they preserved these enhancements. Rulers of the new kingdom, wielding chariots and composite bows, forged an expansive realm stretching from Nubia to Syria, subduing regions previously beyond Egyptian reach. This era of conquest deepened ties between Egypt and Mesopotamia. Egyptian troops ventured into the Levant, where they brushed against Mesopotamian governance and societal norms. The kingdom of Mitanni, which held sway over northern Mesopotamia and Syrian territories in the 15th century BC, fostered diplomatic bonds with Egypt. Unions between royals solidified partnerships. Mitanni princesses wed Egyptian kings, importing Mesopotamian opulent items, creative forms, and refined tastes to the palace. The Amarna letters documenting exchanges between the Egyptian pharaoh and Mitanni ruler highlight a bond of parity, admiration, and shared heritage. Topics in the dispatches cover matrimonial diplomacy, gift swaps, and coalitions against shared foes. Among the presents noted are gold, silver, horses, chariots, fabrics, and furnishings, each symbolizing not only wealth, but also cultural elegance, creative prowess, and skilled craftsmanship. The furniture referenced likely featured Mesopotamian patterns, assembly methods, and ornamental details. Digs at Egyptian locations have yielded pieces displaying external inspirations, such as inlaid ivory, intricate woodworking joints, and motifs drawn from Mesopotamian designs. Local artisans examined these imports, mastered the skills, and wove them into their creations, yielding blended aesthetics that merged Egyptian and Mesopotamian flair. Trade in fabrics between the regions introduced novel fibers, colorants, and loom methods. Luxurious woolens from Mesopotamia, tinted with rare purple from murex snails, appealed to Egypt's upper classes. Expertise in fabric making, sheep husbandry, wool treatment, and dyeing processes spread via commerce. In contrast, Egyptian linen derived from plentiful Nile Valley flax and was celebrated for its delicacy, purity, and excellence, a product shipped across the ancient Near East, reaching Mesopotamia. Beyond commerce, textile interactions conveyed farming insights, fabrication know-how, and design tastes. Culinary and agricultural swaps between the societies brought unfamiliar plants and cooking methods. Mesopotamian fare centered on wheat, barley, dates, and fats from livestock, while Egyptians preferred loaves, ale, seafood, and produce. With growing interactions, select items bridge divides, dates thriving in Mesopotamia and eventually in Egypt's western oases joined Egyptian meals. Some Mesopotamian baking styles and fermentation practices for beer likely shaped Egyptian recipes. Bread's emblematic role in both realms underscores common agrarian roots. In Mesopotamia, it served as an essential sustenance for survival. For Egyptians, bread carried parallel weight but also spiritual depth, offered to divinities and entombed with the deceased to nourish them in the afterlife. Variations in bread forms, their designs, and ceremonial applications highlight a level of complexity far exceeding basic sustenance, elevating everyday fare to sacred emblems. The advanced methods of fermentation essential for crafting beer reveal deep insights into biochemical processes. People in both Mesopotamia and Egypt produce beer from barley or emmer wheat. This involved grasping the steps of germinating grains, creating mash, allowing fermentation, and ensuring longevity. Comparable methods across these areas point to either independent innovation or the sharing of expertise. Records from antiquity describe Egyptian beer as available in various kinds, differing in potency and taste profiles. Expert brewers, frequently women, oversaw the production to yield reliable and enjoyable results. In Mesopotamia, the practice mirrored this, with dedicated specialists crafting diverse brews tailored to specific needs, routine allotments for laborers, premium varieties for celebrations, and sacred ones for spiritual rites. The role of beer in the economies of these cultures was immense. It functioned as money, wages for work, and a means to ease social bonds. Those building the pyramids got beer allowances alongside their pay. Mastering mass production, storage, and allocation of beer showcased administrative and technological prowess that underpinned major governmental endeavors. Calculations for allotting beer shares, measuring raw materials, and monitoring dispersal feature prominently in bureaucratic records from Egypt and Mesopotamia alike. The challenges resembled one another. What number of laborers could a set quantity of grain support? What volume of beer per person? How enduring were the stockpiles? Scribes and officials tackled these real-world math issues routinely, illustrating the routine use of quantitative skills. Training programs for these record-keepers exhibited parallel frameworks in the two societies. Usually boys from upper-class backgrounds began their schooling at about 5 or 6 years old. Over many years, they duplicated classic writings, mastered scripts, honed arithmetic abilities, and delved into written works. Teaching methods stressed drilling, rote learning, and proficiency in established patterns. Precision and uniformity mattered more than originality. Artifacts like surviving clay tablets from Mesopotamian schools offer rich details on this training, including drills where pupils replicated cuneiform symbols, solved numeric puzzles, and transcribed stories. One can trace the learning sequence clearly. Basic symbols initially, followed by sound units, vocabulary, phrases, and ultimately full compositions. Uniformity in the syllabus throughout Mesopotamia allowed officials from various urban centers to interact smoothly via shared terms and norms. Egyptian training for scribes echoed these approaches. Works such as the Kemet from the Middle Kingdom era supplied model expressions and structures for replication. Ethical lessons woven into these materials underscored the value of clerical duties, the prestige of mental work above physical toil, and the benefits of being able to read and write. Such principles reflected the scribal traditions of Mesopotamia, where these professionals also rose to privileged ranks. Sharing expertise in record-keeping across societies depended on people fluent in multiple tongues who could decipher both scripts. Traces of these experts emerge in dual-language carvings, word catalogs linking Sumerian words to Akkadian equivalents, and subsequent Egyptian-Akkadian glossaries. Such study aids promoted acquiring foreign tongues and bridged gaps in communication. The Semitic tongues of Mesopotamia stemmed from a separate lineage compared to ancient Egyptian. Yet in subsequent eras, both areas adopted Aramaic as a shared medium. Originating in Syria, Aramaic extended through the ancient Near East in the first millennium BC, serving as the standard for commerce, statecraft, and governance. Scribes in Egypt picked up Aramaic to deal with traders from Mesopotamia and the Levant. This verbal link sustained the sharing of concepts well beyond the Bronze Age. Around 1200 BC, the Bronze Age downfall fractured these interaction pathways. Various elements, like shifts in weather, shortages of food, population movements, and conflicts, overthrew numerous states in the Near East. The Hittite realm fell apart, Mycenaean Greece splintered, and many Levantine settlements lay deserted. Egypt endured, though diminished, forfeiting its outer domains and withdrawing to the Nile region. This downfall cut off numerous ties between Egypt and Mesopotamia. Pathways for commerce that had transported items and concepts for more than 2,000 years grew hazardous or unusable. Official letters halted. The movement of information diminished, yet the downfall failed to wipe out prior transmissions. The core insights that Mesopotamia had imparted to Egypt remained intact. Such innovations as writing, mathematics, architectural principles, and religious concepts endured long after. Egypt underwent phases of division and domination by outsiders, yet it rebounded, undergoing revivals where ancient customs were intentionally restored. Starting around 664 BC, the late period featured a purposeful revival of artistic techniques, rituals, and governance from the Old Kingdom era. This archaizing impulse highlights the Egyptians' keen sense of their past, acknowledging prior eras as pinnacles of culture deserving imitation. Still, external elements persisted amid these resurgences. The Persian takeover in 525 BC introduced Mesopotamian bureaucratic methods, Aramaic as the language of administration, and ideas from Zoroastrianism. Alexander the Great's invasion in 332 BC then ushered in Greek influences, which themselves drew from Mesopotamian advances in astronomy, math, and thought. The Ptolemaic era, under Greek rulers as pharaohs, marked the peak of this blending of traditions. The Ptolemies constructed in native Egyptian forms, honored local deities, and embodied classic pharaonic roles. At the same time, they established the Library of Alexandria, drawing experts from the Mediterranean and Near East alike. This renowned collection held manuscripts from Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Persia, and India. Researchers there examined, rendered into other tongues, analyzed, and integrated insights from diverse heritages. In the 2nd century AD, the astronomer Ptolemy, based in Alexandria, drew on Babylonian star records from ages past to perfect his depictions of celestial paths. His Almagest, the pivotal astronomical work through antiquity and the Middle Ages, rested squarely on Mesopotamian roots. The mathematical tools he employed, the geometrical frameworks he devised, and the empirical records he drew from all linked back to Mesopotamia via the relay through Egypt. Medical lore safeguarded in Alexandria likewise merged Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Greek streams. The Greek doctor Galen, trained in Alexandria, wove in Egyptian insights on anatomy and Mesopotamian writings on drugs to form his therapeutic framework. His writings, safeguarded in Arabic versions amid the Islamic Golden Age, carried this fused medical wisdom into medieval Europe. The safeguarding and rendering of old wisdom into Arabic formed yet another link in this enduring narrative. As Muslim scholars overran the Near East during the 7th and 8th centuries AD, they discovered venerable works in Syriac, Coptic, and Greek. They rendered these into Arabic, delved into them, and built further. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, founded in the 9th century AD, served as the hub of this translational endeavor. Mesopotamian cuneiform inscriptions, by then illegible, offered no direct insight anymore. Yet their substance had passed along through layered societies, from Sumerian to Akkadian to Aramaic to Greek to Arabic. Each rendition reshaped the material for fresh settings, while the essential notions endured. Babylonian math shaped Islamic algebra. Mesopotamian stargazing shaped Islamic studies of the heavens. The lineage remained intact. Europe's Renaissance unearthed this heritage via ties to the Islamic realm. Arabic manuscripts rendered into Latin delivered Mesopotamian and Egyptian lore, sieved through Greek and Islamic lenses to Western thinkers. The star charts Copernicus consulted incorporated figures originating in Babylonian sightings. The spatial theorems Renaissance geometers explored stood on bedrock from ancient Mesopotamia. This expansive timeline, stretching from Sumer to the present, underscores the enduring thread of human insight. Concepts forged in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago continue to mold our worldview. The 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle, the zodiac signs, the wheel, the very act of writing, all gifts from Mesopotamia that linger in everyday existence. Egypt played a vital part in this relay. It conserved, reshaped, and passed on Mesopotamian wisdom to ensuing societies. The pyramids, icons of Egyptian prowess, also embody this dynamic of cultural interplay. They embody the fusion of Mesopotamian design ideas with Egypt's own materials, beliefs, and ingenuity. They endure as tributes not merely to Egyptian legacy, but to humanity's shared progress, to our capacity to draw from each other, erect on common bases, and forge achievements surpassing what any one society might muster in isolation. In exploring the pyramids, we delve into the apex of thousands of years of gathered erudition. The math woven into their ratios stems from Mesopotamian numeral frameworks. Their stellar orientations echo watching methods honed in Sumerian sanctuary towers. The administrative expertise needed to construct the pyramids stems from governance structures first established in Mesopotamian urban centers, the spiritual principles embedded within them, the bond linking the terrestrial and celestial realms, the soul's immortality, and the afterlife's reckoning trace their origins to Mesopotamian religious thought. Far from undermining Egyptian ingenuity, this perspective enriches our understanding. It positions the pyramids not as standalone marvels, but as integral elements in a larger narrative of human interaction, creativity, and cultural blending. Drawing from Mesopotamian insights, the Egyptians forged creations that were distinctly their own, embodying their distinctive beliefs, spiritual outlook, and bond with the sacred. The elusive tie between the pyramids and Sumer isn't some concealed artifact tucked away in an unexplored tomb. Rather, it lies in the web of interactions, the commerce pathways, trader interactions, envoy exchanges, scholarly academies, and gradual cultural fusion that unfolded across eras. Traces of this appear clearly in the digs if we seek them out, evident in the resemblances, overlaps, and common underpinnings. Grasping this interplay demands rejecting the idea that major societies evolve in splendid isolation. It calls for acknowledging that societal advancement is shared, erected upon prior legacies, with wisdom passed down through time and societies. As enduring symbols, the pyramids honor this dynamic as tributes to interpersonal ties every bit as much as to exceptional feats. Thus, while we gaze in awe at the pyramids, we ought to equally celebrate the expansive array of human bonds that enabled their rise. Sumerian agriculturists who pioneered wheat cultivation, the writers who devised cuneiform, the stargazers who mapped the heavens, the builders of ziggurats, all played a role in the pyramid's erection. Despite never touching Egyptian soil, their expertise journeyed afar, evolved, and manifested anew amid the sands of Egypt. This represents the authentic tale of the pyramids, mirroring the essence of human progress, assembled via interchange, invention, and the openness to absorb from others while upholding one's heritage. The bond uniting Sumer and Egypt remains overt, etched into the very rock, safeguarded in the lore they hold, and mirrored in the links they evoke. All it takes is viewing with clear, unbiased sight to perceive it. Cylinder seals found within Egyptian settings merit closer scrutiny. These compact items, usually 2 to 3 inches in length and etched from durable materials such as lapis lazuli, carnelian, or hematite, stand as hallmark Mesopotamian creations. Rolled over damp clay, they imprinted the engraved imagery, functioning as a mark to verify paperwork, denote possession, and secure vessels. This method proves refined, practical, and distinctly Mesopotamian. In comparison, Egyptian seals were of the stamp variety, flat-faced with incised patterns pressed into clay or wax. Simpler to produce and fitting for local purposes, the stamp seal suited Egyptian requirements well. Yet, in the pre-dynastic era and the dawn of the First Dynasty, cylinder seals emerge in Egyptian sites with growing regularity. These prove no local knockoffs. Expert stylistic review verifies them as genuine Mesopotamian artifacts, crafted by artisans from the region. The imagery etched on these seals further attests to their Mesopotamian provenance. Common themes feature processions of beasts, mythical beings, and ceremonial depictions of individuals nearing gods or presenting tributes. The artistic approaches, the depiction of physiques, attire, and hairstyles, align with Mesopotamian conventions over Egyptian ones. When Egyptian makers later crafted cylinder seals, they retain the shape, but infused it with native aesthetics and symbols. Discovered in high-status Egyptian graves, these seals signify prized status symbols. An elite Egyptian interred alongside a Mesopotamian cylinder seal signaled engagement with global circles, involvement in far-reaching commerce, and cultural webs. Beyond utility, the seal embodied refinement, global awareness, and ties to remote hubs of learning. Practically, seals validated records, fastened containers of oils or vintages, and imprinted clay tokens housing transaction details. Integrating sealing methods into Egyptian bureaucracy signals the uptake of Mesopotamian administrative norms. Local leaders appreciated how such systems curbed deceit, promoted responsibility, and preserved archives. The innovation was embraced precisely for its effectiveness. Pottery finds underscoring ties between Mesopotamia and Egypt carry similar weight. Ceramic forms remain tied to specific cultures with unique contours, ornamental patterns, and production methods emerging from each area. The presence of pottery from other cultures in digs signals exchanges like trade, movement of people, or shared influences. In Egypt's Naqada II era, from about 3,500 to 3,200 BC, items bearing clear Mesopotamian traits began showing up more often. Distinct pot types typical of Mesopotamia, such as jars featuring wavy handles and specific bowl designs, emerged in Egyptian sites at that time. Tests on the clay's composition confirm that certain pieces were crafted in Mesopotamia and brought over, while others used Egyptian materials but copied those foreign shapes. This sequence of bringing in originals and then copying them locally stands as a textbook sign of how ideas spread between societies. Even the ways potters decorated their work echoed Mesopotamian styles. Egyptian ceramics from the Nasada period started using painted motifs, unique geometric shapes, and color schemes that mirrored standard Mesopotamian practices. Local artisans encountered these imported pots, were drawn to the patterns, and wove comparable features into their creations. Gradually, these outside touches blended with Egypt's native methods, giving rise to mixed artistic forms. The decorated pots from Nakada to mark a vibrant phase in creative output. They featured images of boats, wildlife, people, and abstract designs. The boat illustrations stand out especially, rendered with tall prows and sterns, several rowers, and occasionally emblems or flags on masts. These vessels display some purely Egyptian traits, yet include elements hinting at Mesopotamian or Levantine origins. Beyond depictions, the actual boats as artifacts offer proof of interactions. In antiquity, boat building varied across areas due to local resources and water conditions. Crafted for the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Mesopotamian vessels employed construction approaches unlike those for the Nile's Egyptian craft. However, Levantine ships designed for the Mediterranean impacted practices in both areas. Egypt sourced its cedar for boats from Lebanon. Securing this wood meant sustaining commerce with Levantine ports such as Byblos. Those ports also linked up with Mesopotamia, acting as go-betweens. A trading vessel departing Byblos could transport Egyptian gold to Mesopotamian bazaars, then sail back loaded with textiles, cylinder seals, and lapis lazuli from there. Crew members on such voyages, enduring long stretches on the water and in distant harbors, effectively spread cultural notions alongside their goods. Egyptian ship construction progressed notably through the ages. Initial designs relied on bundled reeds tied with ropes, fine for Nile trips, but not for open water travel. Shifting to solid wooden plank hulls marked a huge leap forward, demanding fresh tools, expertise, and insights. Techniques like woodworking joins, fastening systems, and mortise and tenon assembly might have come from Levantine or Mesopotamian builders. Discoveries of boat graves at Abydos and Saqqara highlight how vital seafaring was to Egyptians. Life-sized wooden craft were buried beside kings' tombs to aid the ruler's voyage in the next world. When unearthed and examined, these reveal building specifics that align or contrast with traditions elsewhere in the ancient Near East. Such parallels and divergences highlight the flow of tech and local adaptations. Ties in metalworking between Mesopotamia and Egypt uncover yet another layer of shared expertise. Copper smelting originated in Anatolia and the Levant in the Chalcolithic era, circa 5000 BC, then moved to Mesopotamia and later Egypt. Yet the jump to bronze, mixing copper with tin for a tougher material, demanded fresh understanding. This alloy surfaced in Mesopotamia by roughly 3000 BC, coinciding exactly with its debut in Egypt, a timing that raises eyebrows. Tin being scarce, the closest supplies for either civilization lay in spots like Afghanistan, Anatolia, or even Cornwall in Britain. Accessing it called for vast trading webs across continents, mastering the blend of copper and tin. Ideal proportions, melting points, and molding processes all involved acquired know-how. Surviving Mesopotamian records on metalwork, despite being incomplete, outline steps for smelting, mixtures, and pouring. Egypt's preserved depictions in tombs and site finds display comparable approaches. Their ovens, melting pots, and forms align with designs that predated them in Mesopotamia. Metalworkers in ancient Egypt likely acquired their skills from experts in Mesopotamia, possibly via hands-on teaching or by examining traded bronze items and figuring out production methods. The implements employed in building the pyramids highlight the advanced state of metalworking during Egypt's early dynastic period. Chisels, saws, and drills made from copper played a vital role in extracting and carving stone from quarries. Tools crafted from bronze, which proved tougher, would have performed even better. Research in experimental archaeology by Dennis Stocks and colleagues shows that copper implements, combined with quartz sand, acting as a cutting agent, could slice through limestone and tougher rocks. Yet this method proved time-consuming, demanding, and led to quick degradation of the tools. The sheer amount of copper needed for pyramid projects was staggering. Countless tools would have deteriorated and required renewal over a 2-decade build timeline. This supply of copper originated from specific places. Egypt tapped into deposits in the Sinai Peninsula, with mining operations active since the early dynastic era. However, the massive output needed for pyramid work points to structured mining efforts, along with smelting sites and supply chains. Mesopotamia, by contrast, demanded huge volumes of copper too, but lacked domestic supplies. Their copper arrived from Oman, the Zagros Mountains, and Anatolia via extensive trade routes spanning the Near East. Managing this commerce, involving exploration for ore veins, setting up mining outposts, smelting into ingots, and hauling them, demanded complex economic and bureaucratic frameworks. Records from Mesopotamian administration capture copper dealings with precision. Clay tablets catalog amounts incoming, outgoing, and stockpiled. The bookkeeping was exacting, monitoring copper by mass, origin, and purpose. Egypt's own administrative prowess, despite sparser records owing to papyrus decay, had to match this level to enable grand building endeavors. Methods for mining copper ore and refining it into usable metal shared commonalities throughout the ancient Near East. Ore got pulverized, heated to eliminate contaminants, and melted in charcoal-fired furnaces. Success hinged on practical insights into chemistry, gained through trial and error, rather than formal science. Operators discovered via practice which ores produced superior results, the right furnace heat levels, and ways to refine the output's quality. Such expertise passed down via mentorship programs. Seasoned smelters instructed novices over extended periods, emphasizing hands-on practice over texts. Knowledge flowed orally through show and tell and practice. Yet as artisans migrated, traders moved metals between lands, and commerce linked far-flung spots. Metalworking know-how disseminated widely. Today's scientific scrutiny of old copper and bronze relics uncovers key details on exchange routes. Studying isotopes in copper allows pinpointing ore origins fairly accurately. Tests on Egyptian bronze items often link the copper to Sinai deposits, while tin hailed from remote spots like Afghanistan. This confirms Egypt's ties to vast trade webs across the ancient realm. Similar exams of Mesopotamian bronzes show copper drawn from varied locales: Oman, Anatolia, the Zagros Mountains. Such variety indicates an intricate trading setup, blending metals from afar, creating alloys, and circulating them anew. A bronze artifact discovered in Ur illustrates how these practices influenced other trades. Potters, textile makers, woodworkers, masons, and goldsmiths all honed expert abilities over prolonged apprenticeships. These specialists grouped into associations or ateliers, frequently linked to sacred sites or monarchical courts. In Mesopotamian urban centers, official documents outline craft operations detailing personnel, resources used, and items produced. Egyptian workshops mirrored this setup. The community at Deir el Medina, home to artisans crafting and adorning Pharaoh's sepulchres in the Valley of the Kings, offers rich insights. It formed a deliberate community featuring uniform dwellings, shared amenities, and rigorous management. Artisans drew provisions, equipment, and supplies from government depots. Supervisors tracked their efforts, logging accomplishments. Such structured approaches, the design of artisan hamlets, efficient workforce allocation, and official supervision, echo Mesopotamian precedents. The government's function as coordinator of economy, supplier of raw goods, and dispenser of completed works aligns with systems pioneered in Mesopotamia's urban polities. Egypt tailored these administrative frameworks to suit its unique environment, developing mechanisms that enabled massive building projects and artisanal manufacturing on a scale never seen before. In both Mesopotamian and Egyptian societies, temple centers acted as vital economic hubs. These institutions held property, hired laborers, and oversaw manufacturing processes. During the New Kingdom, the sanctuary at Karak stood out as one of Egypt's richest establishments. It controlled extensive farmlands across the Nile region, supported a workforce of thousands, including priests and artisans, and engaged in commerce with distant territories. Records of the temple's financial dealings formed comprehensive archives that captured key aspects of Egypt's commercial landscape. Temples in Mesopotamia operated in much the same way. The shrine of Anana in Uro emerged as a major economic force, managing farmland, raising livestock, weaving fabrics, and conducting exchanges throughout Mesopotamia and further afield. Its collection of thousands of clay tablets offers an intricate chronicle of these operations. Documents covered ration distributions, labor allocations, land assessments, and animal inventories, all captured with precision. Overseeing these temple-based economies demanded proficiency in numbers, literacy, and efficient management. Scribes computed plot sizes, monitored work hours, allocated food supplies, and prepared financial summaries. The exercises in apprentice scribal manuals mirror these everyday tasks. For instance, a common exercise might pose: if a team of 10 laborers finishes reaping a plot in 6 days, how many are required to complete the job in 4 days? Such computations prepared scribes for roles in governance. The designs of temples in Mesopotamia and Egypt highlight shared traits alongside distinct variations. In Mesopotamia, these structures often took a rectangular form, centered on an enclosed yard. At one end lay the holy chamber housing the deity's image. Devotees progressed via a series of open areas and entrances, transitioning from everyday zones to zones of greater holiness. This shift from the mundane to the holy manifested in architectural features like portals, lintels, and dividers. Egyptian sacred sites adhered to comparable ideas but reshaped them to align with local beliefs and ceremonies. Elements such as the towering pylon entrance, expansive forecourt, and column-filled hypostyle chamber within the core chamber echoed the path from disorder to harmony. This mirrored the move from the external realm to the realm of the gods, with features like fading illumination, descending roof heights, and constricting corridors amplifying the aura of nearing the divine. Yet these parallels might stem from independent evolution instead of outright borrowing. The practical demands of sacred design, handling crowds of pilgrims while safeguarding holy seclusion, could prompt similar approaches in separate societies. Evidence of exchange emerges in the chronology. Concepts like sequential spatial layouts and tiered entry points surfaced first in Mesopotamia, Egyptian sacred buildings adopted them amid rising interactions between the two cultures. Columns in building design offer yet another connection. Mesopotamian structures seldom featured independent pillars, as mud bricks. Their main material couldn't bear the tension for spanning broad areas with heavy beams. Instead, they relied on sturdy walls positioned near one another, resulting in compact interiors. Any pillars present were usually ornamental or held ritual significance over load-bearing roles. In contrast, Egyptian builders, working mainly with stone, harnessed the pillar's strength fully. The vast hypostyle area at Karnak boasts 134 enormous pillars in aligned rows, upholding a substantial stone ceiling. These feats of engineering were hewn from monolithic blocks or pieced from stacked cylindrical segments, their tops adorned with motifs drawn from native flora like lotus, papyrus, and palm, added aesthetic flair. However, the fundamental idea of pillars, employing upright elements to hold up crosswise weights, arose much sooner in varied settings. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe, from around 9600 BC, rank among the earliest known examples globally. These hefty T-form monoliths, up to 20 tons apiece, show that prehistoric communities grasped the basics of pillar use. By the era when Egyptian builders integrated them, this expertise was already millennia old. Ideas about construction probably spread via diverse routes. Journeyman builders traversing sites and areas shared methods and concepts. Though seldom surviving, sketches or documents might have passed among high-level designers. Additionally, scale models, miniature building replicas, helped planners envision and share ideas. These portable items could be shared, examined, and replicated. An example from the Step Pyramid site, a diminutive limestone model of a structure, illustrates how Egyptian designers employed such aids. Models crafted from clay in Mesopotamia fulfilled comparable roles. The presence of these artifacts highlights a degree of conceptual thinking, enabling builders to conceptualize structures as ideas that could be visualized, analyzed, and improved prior to actual building. Among the core innovations of early civilizations, the irrigation networks in Mesopotamia stand out as pivotal. Unlike the reliable Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers proved erratic, with floods striking unpredictably throughout the year and devastating agriculture and villages, while dry spells could desiccate the land. Managing these waterways demanded vast arrays of canals, embankments, and runoff channels. Building and sustaining this irrigation framework involved massive commitments of coordinated effort, spanning multiple eras. In southern Mesopotamia, the initial setups from the Ubaid period, predating 4000 BC, were basic, channeling river water directly to nearby plots. Gradually, these evolved into intricate webs of waterways that transported moisture over long distances from the primary streams. Keeping these channels operational called for ongoing labor. Sediments built up, necessitating regular dredging, while shorelines wore down and required strengthening. Overseeing such upkeep across various settlements necessitated strong governance and collaboration. Records from Mesopotamian administration meticulously document canal care. Teams of workers were allocated to designated stretches of waterway, with duties apportioned according to owned acreage. Conflicts regarding water access were resolved by temple authorities or appointed rulers. The intricate demands of handling water resources spurred advances in governance, bureaucracy, and centralized power. In contrast, Egypt's water challenges differed markedly. The Nile's regular inundations allowed for simpler setups. Most areas along the river relied on basin-style farming, featuring earthen barriers that captured overflow to soak the ground. As the waters receded, seeds were sown in the fertile, damp soil. This approach proved straightforward, enduring, and demanded little upkeep. Yet core elements of hydraulic control, such as mapping out farmlands, estimating water needs, measuring quantities, and mobilizing workers for repairs, reveal parallels between the two regions' methods. Scribes in Egypt employed geometric techniques to measure plot sizes. They assessed irrigation demands according to plant varieties and ground quality. They also directed teams to repair barriers and unclog channels. Such bureaucratic routines echo knowledge frameworks that originated sooner in Mesopotamia. Both cultures preserved surveying expertise in their writings. Mesopotamian instructional texts cover computations for land measurement, partitioning uneven parcels, and estimating workforce for digging operations. Egyptian papyri feature analogous exercises. Frequently, the approaches match precisely, relying on identical geometric principles and computational steps. A notable instance involves figuring the area of a round plot. Early Mesopotamian sources use an estimate for pi of 3. Subsequent Babylonian scholars improved it to 3.125, closer to reality. The Egyptian version found in the Rind papyrus varies slightly, yet demonstrates comparable ingenuity, yielding an effective pi value of about 3.16, strikingly near the actual figure. This alignment in estimates points to either separate inventions or cultural exchange. Separate development remains feasible. Various scholarly lineages grappling with circular measurements could reach alike approximations via distinct paths. However, the resemblance in methodologies and particular geometric tactics implies some exchange or common roots. Tasks like apportioning estates, defining territorial limits, and resolving claims all hinged on mathematical and juridical skills. Codes such as Hammurabi's in Mesopotamia outline extensive rules for land conflicts, aquatic entitlements, and legacy splits. These regulations embody ages of judicial insight shaped by innumerable cases and rulings. While Egyptian jurisprudence is documented less completely, it tackles parallel concerns. Writings from the New Kingdom detail courtroom processes, verdicts, and asset handovers. Standards for proof, statements from observers, and courtroom protocols display a level of refinement akin to those in Mesopotamia. The idea of documented statutes, formalized and open to all, likely spread from Mesopotamia to Egypt. The stela bearing Hammurabi's code, placed in prominent locations for public reference, embodied a transformative principle: legislation as communal information, not esoteric lore guarded by clergy or monarchs. Such openness had clear political aims. It bolstered the ruler's power by validating his rule and showcasing his dedication to fairness. In Egypt, pharaohs asserted godlike power that, in principle, set them beyond legal bounds. Yet they too positioned themselves as upholders of justice and preservers of Mayat. The idea of rule as a sacred duty, where the monarch upholds universal harmony and delivers equity, echoes across Mesopotamian and Egyptian traditions. In Mesopotamia, rulers acted as caretakers for their subjects, tasked with safeguarding their well-being and security. They erected shrines, managed irrigation channels, guarded frontiers, and dispensed judgments. These duties blended spiritual and civic elements. Neglecting them might provoke godly wrath, showing up as battlefield losses, failed harvests, or societal turmoil. Egyptian pharaohs shouldered comparable burdens, though with a key distinction: they embodied divinity. This supreme role granted unchallenged command, but also total accountability. The ruler's moral uprightness, ceremonial cleanliness, and fitting behavior proved vital for upholding Ma'at. Daily rites, tributes to deities, and grand observances all work to preserve the world's balance. This contrast in views of sovereignty, Mesopotamian leaders as mortal agents of the divine versus Egyptian pharaohs as gods incarnate, highlights Egypt's reshaping of Mesopotamian governance rooted in faith. Egypt adopted the notion of heaven-ordained rule and intensified it, forging a throne so mighty and divinely endorsed that it could rally the manpower and materials for building pyramids. Erecting those pyramids marked the peak of administrative prowess. The Great Pyramid demanded about 2.3 million stone blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons in weight. Standard estimates place the build over 20 years. That pace means setting a block every 2 to 3 minutes around the clock for 2 full decades. The coordination involved boggles the mind. Just sustaining the labor force called for enormous supply chains. Assuming 10,000 to 20,000 workers, the everyday provisions would have been immense. The crew required loaves, ale, beef, seafood, and produce. Making bread meant milling cereals, firing kilns, and hauling output. Brewing ale involved steeped grains, fermenting jars, and oversight for quality. Sourcing meat entailed raising livestock, slaughtering, and either storing or eating it fresh. Discoveries at the workers' village of Hayt el Ghuraib, unearthed by Mark Lenner, reveal this vast support network. The location features ovens for churning out thousands of breads each day, vats for mass ale production, and spots for readying Nile perch to eat. The food output's magnitude aligned with the pyramid project's demands. This went beyond a makeshift outpost. It formed a deliberate community fueling a factory-like endeavor. Labor management drew from Mesopotamian models. Teams tagged with labels and symbols handled set jobs. Rivalries among crews boosted output. Work pride seen in scrawls and carvings spurred the hands. Compensation through allotments, not coin, mirrored the sharing-based systems in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Yet pyramid building demanded far more than structure. It needed expertise, design skills to craft an enduring edifice of such vast size, math skills to figure ratios, slopes, and volumes, star knowledge to align it with north, south, east, and west. Technical skills to devise ways of hoisting and placing blocks weighing tons. What was the origin of these abilities? The usual view holds that they arose in Egypt via steps from mastabas to stepped pyramids to smooth-sided ones. However, that sequence has holes. The shift from the step pyramid to the Great Pyramid feels like a breakthrough, not a gradual climb. Accuracy surges, size balloons. Technical finesse hits heights unseen in subsequent structures. This trend implies the Fourth Dynasty held insights that faded in time. If homegrown, born from local trials, such wisdom ought to have endured, sharpened, advanced. Rather, it waned. Successor pyramids shrink, lose exactness, weaken in build. The expertise dimmed, hinting it was never truly grasped or absorbed. A stronger case is that it came from outside. Better matching the clues. If Mesopotamian building and number skills laid the groundwork, Egyptian builders could use them practically without mastering the deeper ideas. Architects in ancient Egypt were capable of carrying out intricate designs, adhering to established methods, and yielding impressive outcomes. However, lacking a solid grasp of the underlying theory, they were unable to sustain that expertise over time. Once the experts from that era passed away, so too did the specialized skills they held. Such a theory accounts for the abrupt emergence of these feats, their extraordinary height of success, and the eventual fading away. It clarifies the reason the Great Pyramid emerged in its complete form without any signs of gradual evolution. It also accounts for how subsequent rulers, even as they strove to match the feats of their predecessors, always came up short in their efforts. These later generations relied on recollections, customs, and ceremonial practices devoid of the deep comprehension that enabled the initial triumphs. The absence of written records on pyramid building reinforces this view. The Egyptians meticulously recorded their bureaucratic processes, sacred ceremonies, and wartime endeavors. They produced engravings, papyri, and wall art in tombs that detailed nearly every facet of their society. Remarkably, though, no text exists that outlines the process of erecting a pyramid. There are no blueprints for structures, no guides to engineering, and no scholarly works on the geometry of pyramids. This gap in the records is profoundly telling. The pinnacle of Egyptian ingenuity, the iconic structures that symbolize their legacy, lacks any blueprint for creation. The Logbook of Merer, unearthed at Wadi al-Jarf, details the transport of limestone from Tura to Giza in Khufu's era. It logs the supply chains, vessel counts, labor teams, pathways, and shipments. Yet it remains silent on matters of planning, calculations, or structural concepts. This implies the expertise was closely guarded, confined to a select few who refrained from documenting it. Alternatively, it points to knowledge passed down verbally via hands-on instruction or practical examples without ever being codified in scripts. Both possibilities highlight that the skills for pyramid building were not disseminated broadly, not included in standard training for scribes, and not safeguarded for future ages. The ties to Mesopotamia offer a credible origin for such expertise. Building practices in Mesopotamia, which predated the pyramids by hundreds of years, had already refined complex approaches to grand-scale edifices. Their writings on mathematics reveal a deep knowledge of shapes and computations. Their sky-watching records supplied tools for exact positioning and direction. Should this body of information have entered Egypt in the time before the dynasties, via commercial ties, envoy interactions, or the arrival of talented migrants, it likely came as an integrated set of interconnected ideas and methods. Those in Egypt who received it, without the complete conceptual framework, would have used it in hands-on ways, generating extraordinary accomplishments while missing the full rationale. This framework for how ideas spread accounts for instances where Egyptian feats appear to surpass the evident resources of their society. Consider the exact orientation of the Great Pyramid, the precision in its ratios, the integration of key numerical values. These all hint at insights surpassing what one might anticipate from a budding culture. Yet viewing the knowledge as borrowed, not homegrown, dissolves that seeming inconsistency. The impact of this exchange of ideas reaches well into later history. The geometric concepts embedded in the pyramids shaped Greek mathematics. The stellar orientations influenced Greek views of the universe. Organizational frameworks offered templates for Hellenistic realms. Structural marvels motivated Roman constructors. This progression of influence flowed onward through the Islamic era into Europe's Middle Ages and on to our contemporary society. In applying geometry to everyday challenges, we draw on foundations that link back via Greek scholarship to Egyptian uses and Mesopotamian roots. Measuring angles in 360-degree circles stems from the Sumerian system of base 60, coordinating massive endeavors via layered management echo setups from ancient Mesopotamian urban centers refined in Egypt. The pyramids endure as testaments to this flow of wisdom, tangible symbols of humanity's shared intellectual heritage. They embody more than just Egypt's prowess. They capture the unified accomplishments of the ancient Near East. The blocks were mined in Egypt, carved by its laborers, and placed by its specialists. But the insights that rendered this feasible stretched eastward to Mesopotamia, backward to Sumer, and possibly to even earlier, undiscovered well springs. To truly comprehend the pyramids, one must consider this wider backdrop. They are not solitary marvels in isolation, but nodes in a vast web of cross-cultural sharing across thousands of years. The gap connecting the pyramids to Sumer lies not in some lone relic or secret vault. Rather than a lone discovery or concealed vault, the true bridge between the pyramids and Sumer lies in the buildup of proof for interactions, the overlaps in intellectual frameworks, the resemblances in societal frameworks, and the flow of concepts through societies and eras. This narrative often escapes the notice of conventional archaeology, not due to ill intent or cover-ups, but because today's academic fields are so narrowly focused. Scholars of Egypt concentrate on their domain, just as Mesopotamian experts do theirs, leaving the ties between them underexplored. Yet the ancients ignored such academic silos. They journeyed, bartered, and shared thoughts without restraint. To grasp these early societies, we must transcend contemporary divisions, linking clues from varied lands, and acknowledge that humanity's advancement stems from shared efforts. Viewed through this lens, the pyramids grow all the more awe-inspiring. They embody the blending of insights from diverse origins, the adaptation of passed-down expertise to local realities, and the forging of distinctly Egyptian marvels from a worldly base. They endure as symbols of human creativity, certainly, but equally of our collaborative spirit, our capacity to draw lessons from each other and construct jointly beyond borders and ages.